ready to get this going. Sorry if the quality is a little bit bad. I turned it down to like low latency. So hopefully that means your comments will show up closer to real time if anyone wants to chat. I feel like most people are going to be watching this as a recorded video, and that's fine. But happy to be here. So to give a background on what this is, what I'm doing here, recently the channel passed 10,000 subscribers, which is crazy. It's kind of the height of what I thought we would ever get. So thank you to everyone who made that possible. It's super cool to get to talk about music history to people who care about music history. So super grateful for that. Thank you for getting me and us in this community to 10,000 subscribers. That's super cool. Also, sorry if this mic is not very loud. It's not a good mic, and so whenever I use a tripod, I have to be like right here, but that looks weird. So I'm hoping it works out. Anyway, past 10,000, I asked people what they wanted me to do for that. I posted a community poll, and it was either a Q&A or a vinyl tour or nothing, because no one really cares about this. And the majority of people voted for a vinyl tour, so I'm just going to get on here, share all of the records I own, and kind of tell a little bit of a story behind some of them. Some of them don't have much of a story, and there's a lot of them. I don't know how we're going to get through this. I don't know how long it's going to take, but we'll figure it out. I'm going to start with kind of the ones that I don't think anyone's going to really care about, and then we'll move in at the end to some that I think my audience will be much more interested in. But before we get going on any of that, just if you have any questions you want me to answer, drop it in the comments if this is a video or in the live chat, and I'll get to those. Two caveats before we get started on this. And if you've watched many of my videos, you'll know that I love me a good caveat. So two caveats. One, I don't call this a record collection. And what I mean by that, to give an example, I have several friends who really love reading, really love books. They'll buy a lot of books to read. They're buying like mass market paperbacks. They're buying books because they want to read them. They don't care about the actual book. They're not buying that book to have it. They're buying that book to read it. It's not a valuable book. They're not looking for special things about it. They're just like, looks like an interesting book, I'm going to buy it to read. That's not a book collection. That's just someone who buys books. I do have a book collection. I will buy books specifically because of what they are, not because I want to read them. So I'll be looking for special editions, for autographed copies, for first editions, for first printings. So it's just a different attitude when you're a collector of something versus just like a casual buyer of something. I'm much more a casual buyer of vinyl. I buy vinyl records because I want to listen to them, not because they're special in any way. So there's not like first pressing special edition things in here. You're going to see a lot of repressings. You're going to see a lot of not great quality repressings even, because I'm also not an audiophile. I don't care as much about like what the actual recording sounds like. I'm more interested in the song. So not super interested in getting like a super special thing. It's a lot of repressings, a lot of not valuable things in here because I buy them to listen to them, not because they're anything super special. So getting that out of the way before anyone gets really disappointed about the records in here. The second caveat is I think it's worth noting how I listen to records. A lot of times when I'm listening to vinyl, it's kind of like a background thing. We'll put it on when we have friends over to play board games or whatever to hang out. We'll put it on while we're cooking dinner or cleaning or whatever. So it's just kind of like in the background. It's not something that I'm sitting down listening to. It'll be on while I'm working from home or writing or whatever. So that kind of changes what I buy. I'm not going to buy a ton of hardcore punk albums because those aren't things you put on in the background. That's much more, those songs demand to be paid attention to, not to just kind of like have on casually in the background. So these records lean that way. It leans more towards background atmosphere type music. It's also why there's not a lot of hip hop, because that kind of wants you to pay attention to the intricacies of it. And that's not true of a lot of these albums. All right, so those are my two caveats, getting them out of the way. I think we're going to start. I tried to break these up into, I think I have 8 different categories. Tried to group them together in some kind of way that made at least a little bit of sense. We'll see if it does to other people. It did to me. we're going to start with the first records I ever got. And for this, it might help to explain how I first started buying records. It was like the summer of 2012, I think. I was coming out of my freshman year of college, going into my sophomore year, and I was supposed to go to Warped Tour in Atlanta with a friend of mine. We had been saving up money. It wasn't coming to Nashville, so we figured we'll just road trip down to Atlanta. But he had to bail on me at the last second, so I had a couple $100 extra, and I was like, I've always wanted a record player, so might as well just use this extra money I have for that. So I bought the record player. It's actually the one I still have, so it's 12 years old. It's a little Audio-Technica one, so I don't even think they make it anymore. I think it's that old, so it's great quality. It's survived moves, so yeah, I recommend Audio-Technica because they last long. And I bought that record player, and my dad said, I have just 2 tubs full of old records that I had when I was like in my 20s or 30s in the 70s and 80s that I just collected these records. So I'm not doing anything with them. If you want them, just go look through them, pick out records. So I did that. That was before I had really gotten into music history, so I didn't really know what I was doing. I just grabbed records from artists that I recognized. And my dad is not super interested in music. He was much more popular level music. We're talking your Journeys, your Seals and Croft, your Doobie Brothers, like that kind of easy listening pop music type stuff. So I just went, grabbed a few records. So I figured I'd start with these because I still have some of them. So that's what this first section is. And these are albums that I don't particularly care about. I don't really have many stories associated with them because they're just random ones I picked up because I knew the name. So if any of these stick out to you, let me know. But yeah, we'll get started on some of them. First up, Jefferson Starship. I got to figure out how to... Red Octopus. This is going to be trippy trying to like line it up. You get it. Don't really have any thoughts or feelings about this. Jefferson Starship's super interesting band, but no thoughts or feelings about that one. I don't know where to put I'm out of desk space, so I don't know where to put this when I'm done with it. I guess on the floor. Then we got Styx. They had a ton of Styx, so this is just one of them. The Grand Illusion. Again, no thoughts or feelings about it. That's going to be the same for a lot of these. I'm going to scoot over, so hopefully I can give more room to actually show off the record. This is really hard to like line up. Sorry about that. I am not a streamer. Next, standard classic. Your classic Journey album. I mean, kind of have to have this. I feel like everyone's got to have it. Again, fine band, fine album, no strong feelings. Next is Boston. And Boston and Styx were 2 that showed up repeatedly in my dad's collection. I think they are 2 of his favorite bands, or at least were at the time. I doubt he remembers much about them at all anymore, but those ones showed up a lot. I think those are the only ones I have of those 2 bands, though. Over the years, I've sent more home with him when I just didn't really care about him anymore. So he has way more at home now. Then we've got the best of the Bachman-Turner Overdrive. Again, no interest. So these are the kind of the boring section. I don't think people are going to care about this. Then we get into a little bit of a pop situation. We've got 3 albums by the Four Seasons. We've got this one, and I think some of these are actually newer. I might have bought these at McKay's. McKay's is like a used bookstore, used media store that's all across Tennessee, but a big one is in Nashville. Tons of books, tons of vinyl. They're not the best for vinyl. They kind of overprice it. But, I mean, I love the Four Seasons. They've got just super solid pop, so I think I bought a couple of those when I saw them at McKay's. So we got this one as well, the second vault of golden hits. It's got Sherry on it, which is my mom's name, so that was always her song, kind of. Then this is the last of the Four Seasons ones I have, Golden Vault of Hits. Then I have the second vault of golden hits. So we got 3 collections of Four Seasons hits. Again, Four Seasons are great, Jersey Boys, all that fun stuff, but not super interested in them. Just, that's good background music. Next, we got one that I don't think I've ever even listened to, the best of Tommy James and the Shondells. I don't really even recognize this one that much. I don't know when I got it. It must be pretty old, but Oh, Crystal Blue Persuasion was one of my dad's favorite songs. So it makes sense that that's why he has that one, and he might have given it to me because of that. But anyway, it's there. Then we've got one of the best albums ever made, actually. Carole King's Tapestry. It's got a cat on it, which I love. My cat's down here. He's asleep. Once I get moving around more, he might wake up. But super great album. I listened to it recently. Beautiful little like inside cover too. I listened to it recently because I listened through Rolling Stone's 100 Greatest Albums of All Time list. I just started at 100 and listened my way through all of them. And I've heard Tapestry before, obviously, but listening through it during that experiment, I was just kind of blown away by it. Like, that was the first time that it really clicked with me of how good it is. So, love that album. Very happy to have it. Very happy to have it for free as well. And then we've got, of course, we got a couple Simon and Garfunkels because my dad is big into yacht rock kind of stuff. So Simon and Garfunkel Greatest Hits. It's got like the original sticker on here, so that's kind of cool. Well, original for whenever he bought this, I don't know. And then another Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water. It's kind of fallen apart a little bit. A lot of these ones I got from my dad, not in the best condition. He didn't necessarily take care of them. No real reason to. Then we've got the best of Peter, Paul, and Mary, 10 years together. So, yeah, I wish I could just like stop and tell more stories about these records and more information, but I just don't have any. These ones are just random ones I picked up because they looked interesting. I will say, just noticing this about the best of Peter, Paul, and Mary, this has a Grimey's sticker on it for $2. Grimey's is Nashville's big record store. My parents lived in Nashville when they were like just out of college, long before I was born. So I'm wondering if Grimey's is that old and if he bought this while they lived here, because that's kind of cool. I didn't recognize that before, but yeah, having the Grimey's sticker on there is really cool because like I still buy records at Grimey's, so it's cool to think that my dad was buying some from there that I now have. Cool thought. Anyway, we're getting towards the end of this stack now. I'm sure everyone's super happy about that. We've got the Grassroots, their greatest hits. Notable mostly because Creed Bratton from The Office is in this band. So that's cool. Oh man, I got an ad. I have like this stream pulled up over here so I can make sure everything's going okay. I just got an ad on my own stream, so that's fun. I set it on like not aggressive, so hopefully there's not that many ads. But I'm new to streaming, so maybe there is. And now we get into a couple Elton Johns. We got The Fox. I mean, it's Elton John. It's Elton John. It's good pop music. I don't particularly love this album of his. There's no songs on here now that I'm looking at it that stand out to me as like, oh, I love that song. So I don't exactly know why he had that one. And then we got Elton John Friends. I will get better at holding these up, I promise, after practice. I should have been keeping a count because I don't know how many I have, so it would have been nice to have like a running counter of how many albums are here. Oh, this is a soundtrack for a film, it looks like. Yeah, see, like I don't know much about these at all. A film by Lewis Gilbert. All right, cool. Elton John made music for the film. Cool. Well, I have that. As you can tell, never listened to it. And then we've got a classic, Phil Collins. I mean, it's Phil Collins. It's beautiful. He's so good. Super cool. Yeah, so that's the end of that section. I don't think we have any questions in the chat. We do not. So if you're watching this as a video later and you have any thoughts or questions or you love any of these albums that I just showed and you have more to say about them than I did, which wouldn't be hard to do, type it in the comments. I would love to hear more about this. I'm sure my dad would find it super cool that people are like looking at his old records and stuff. So leave any comments you want. I used to have way more of his records, but as I said, like as I've gotten more of mine, I've ran out of room and I've had to return some. So they're all back with him now. And again, these are just going on the floor, which is not what you should do. Do not take record storage device or advice from me. All right, the next thing we're going to do, this is a little shorter section. It's one, again, I don't think too many people will care all that much about. I'm just reorganizing them in the way I want to talk about them real quick. So, I started dating my now wife in college, my senior year of college. We've been together. It'll be 10 years in December. And we started this thing pretty early on in our relationship where every year at Christmas, we were like, let's just go on eBay. Let's buy a Christmas vinyl. Let's buy a vinyl record of some Christmas album and get one every year so we can slowly build our collection of really cool Christmas vinyl. And the reason we wanted to do that is because there's nothing better than it's December 18th, and you're just at home with your spouse, with your kids if you have any. You put on a Christmas album, you're sitting there reading with the candle going, you got the tree on. It's just lovely. So we're like, let's get a good rotation so we're not listening to the same albums over and over, and let's just do one a year. So the first one I ever got came from my dad, and it's Bing Crosby's Merry Christmas. I love Bing Crosby. I love what he did. And this is the first album I listen to every year when it gets to be Christmas time. We'll decorate our tree, and the first album we put on is this one while we're decorating our tree. It's a really old one, so I might need to replace it eventually, but for now, Bing Crosby, Merry Christmas. And then whenever that one's done, we'll go to my wife's favorite Christmas album, which is Charlie Brown Christmas. She loves this movie. It's her favorite Christmas movie, watches it every year, so this will be the second album we play every year when we're setting up our tree. And then we just get into the other Christmas ones that we've picked up over the years. We've got the Beach Boys Christmas album. I'm a big Beach Boys fan, so this was one of the first ones we got. This one was, I think, last year. We're at the point now where we're running out of Christmas albums that we really want, so we're scraping the bottom of the barrel. So I got Kenny Loggins and Dolly Parton's Once Upon a Christmas. So this is a fun one. It's got sugar, like Christmas cookies or something on it, which is just a wild one. Does it have that? Maybe not. I don't know. But yeah, Kenny Loggins, Dolly Parton, Once Upon a Christmas. And then we have maybe the best Christmas album of all time. Probably second, actually. But Christmas Song, Nat King Cole. Love this album. A Christmas Song is my dad's favorite Christmas song, so I've always had a special affinity to it. But, I mean, you can't beat Nat King Cole's voice. He's the king. It's super great. And then this one's a fun one. Louis Armstrong, Wishes You a Cool Yule. This has a song on it, Baby It's Cold Outside, featuring Velma Middleton, where you can tell Louis does not remember the words. It's like a live recording, and you can tell that Louis does not know the words. He's just improvising, and it's really funny. Like, you can hear the audience laughing along with him sometimes. Like, it's all in good fun. Great. Like, listen to that song if you don't know it. It's really funny. And also on this album, you have Louis Armstrong reading you the Christmas story at the end. So that's really cool. And then this one is one that I'm not as familiar with, but it might be my wife's favorite. It's the Oh Hello's Christmas album. It's like 4 movements, so it's almost orchestral in that way. And it's really beautiful. Like, it's really well done, but she can tell you more about that one. Again, the Oh Hello's Christmas album. We don't really listen to the Oh Hellos. I don't know them very much, but she loves that Christmas album, so that was one of the recent ones we got. Sorry, I'm not caressing the camera. I've got a cat hair on the lens, so... And then next, you gotta have some Frank Sinatra at Christmas time. So we got A Jolly Christmas from Frank Sinatra. I'm sure he's got other ones we could get, but that's the one we ended up with. It's got Jingle Bells on it. It's got Hark the Herald Angels Sing. You don't need much more than that for a Christmas album. And then we've got what is probably the best actual Christmas album ever made, Phil Spector's Christmas album. This has a lot of his, like the Ronettes, the Crystals, Darlene Love. It's just got incredible songs on it. It's Phil Spector. It's his Christmas gift. It's really cool. And also it's just a cool album too, because like this is printed on the actual album. That's not like a cover. That is the album. It's the record. So it looks cool too. But yeah, that's like probably the actual best Christmas album ever made. Even if it's not my favorite, it's probably the best one just because of the quality on it and because it's Phil Spector in his prime before, everything happened with him. All right, these are going back on the floor. Don't judge me. Okay, next up, we're getting into a miscellaneous section because as people have learned that I love vinyl, it's a very easy Christmas gift to give me. It's just a record. So a lot of people have given me records. Some of them are really good. Some of them are a little bit of misses. But because it's outside of my usual record buying habit, they don't really fit into a category, so I just put them in a miscellaneous section. Some of these I did buy myself. They just don't fit in either. So let me pull these closer. First, we have an album that was a gift from my in-laws. It's U2, the Unforgettable Fire. I am not a big U2 fan. I've never really listened to them. I've never really gotten into them. I like this album, though. I've only listened to it a couple times since they got it for me, and it's solid. I mean, no one needs me to tell them that U2 is a solid band, but it's a good album. I enjoy it. It's not inspired me to go out and listen to way more of U2, though. Like, it's a good album. I enjoyed it. Then we have this, I think was probably a gift from my dad, Creedence Clearwater Revival, featuring John Fogerty Chronicle, 20 Greatest Hits, so just Creedence Clearwater Revival, Greatest Hits. Again, as you could probably expect if you watched the section of my dad's records, Creedence Clearwater Revival is right in line with what he likes, so this was a Christmas gift from him. It's great. I'm not the biggest CCR fan. I mean, I think they've got great songs. I think they're really interesting. Just not a band that I regularly put on and listen to. Still happy to have this. It makes for that good atmospheric background music that I was talking about earlier. We got another Christmas gift from my parents, Elton John Diamonds. So I think this is just his hits, probably a more recent collection of his hits. We had a couple Elton John albums earlier, but this one's just his hits. So it'll probably get played more than those other ones because I really only know Elton John's hits. I don't know his back catalog very well. And then we have one I bought myself, but doesn't really fit in to any other categories I have. We have To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar. This, I believe, in my humble estimation, as someone who is not as familiar with the genre, I think this is the best hip-hop album ever made. It's not my favorite. I have other albums that I like more, including like Paid in Full by Rakim, a couple Outkast albums. So this isn't my favorite, but I think when you listen to it, just the artistry of it, I think this is the best hip-hop album ever made. I think it just kind of combines all of the elements of hip-hop that are so cool and so interesting. So happy to have that. As I said earlier, I don't have a ton of hip-hop. I think this is my only hip-hop. I want to get some more. I want to get like Biggie. I want to get Eric B. and Rakim. I want to get a couple other ones. It's just with hip-hop, hip-hop wants you to sit with the song more. It wants you to pay attention to the rhyme schemes, to the lyrics, to all of that stuff, and that's just not how I listen to records. I put them on as atmospheric background music, so it hasn't made a ton of sense to buy more hip-hop albums, but we were just in Austin, Texas a couple weeks ago, me and my wife, and we went to the store Waterloo, which is like a really famous record store in Austin, and I saw Paid in Full, Eric B. and Rakim there, and really wanted to buy it, but it was like $35, and I could not justify that. And then I saw like a Biggie album that was reasonably priced, but it was only instrumental, and I was like, I don't want it that, even though it might be a cool vinyl to throw on as a background thing, but it was like Ready to Die instrumental, which is cool, but yeah. Then we have a really cool album that I need to listen to more, Erykah Baduism. If you've watched this channel, you know I mispronounce things. I don't know, but this was one of the albums that I listened to back when I was listening through the 100 greatest albums list that Rolling Stone put out. No, Billboard. Rolling Stone. They put out the 100 greatest albums of all time list, and I was listening through it. This is one of the ones that I first listened to through that project, and it blew me away. I fell in love with it. So I saw this album at McKay's, which, as I mentioned earlier, is like a massive media store. There's a couple throughout Tennessee, and not great for vinyl because they overcharge, but I read a lot, so I have a lot of books that I can trade in for store credit, so I still have hundreds of dollars of unspent store credit for McKay's, and I just kind of, if I find a vinyl that looks interesting, I'll pick it up, even though I know I can get it cheaper elsewhere. We have one, that is not even open because my parents don't really understand my music taste, which is fair. And they just took a stab on one for a Christmas gift, and it was a miss, honestly. I don't know why I still have it. I should probably turn it into McKay's for store credit. But it's Rascal Flats Greatest Hits. As you can see, still in the packaging. So I'm not a Rascal Flats fan. I don't dislike them. I don't care. So this is... Yeah, it was a miss, but it's sitting on my shelf along with everything else. Yeah, Marcus, it was a while before I had bought one. I bought a couple that we'll get to in a minute when I was in Austin at Waterloo, and love having them. But yeah, I've been wanting to make a stop by Grimey's in Nashville again to start buying more. Okay, onto the floor these go. All right, now we're on to the next section. This is a section that doesn't really fit with this channel because it's not music history. It's kind of modern bands. It's modern bands that me and my wife love that make for good vinyl experiences. So people might not care about these, but maybe it'll introduce you to some new bands that are doing some cool stuff right now. First, I'm just going to run through a few that my wife has bought or I've bought for my wife because they're some of her bands that she's always loved. I'm sorry for shaking the camera. I've got very limited space on my desk right here. Also, pumpkin beer for the win. Got some Pumpkin, one of the best pumpkin beers. First up, we've got Talking is Hard from Walk the Moon. This is their breakthrough with Shut Up and Dance on it. She was a really big Walk the Moon fan back when she was in high school when they were first starting. They had a song called Anna Sun that they released as a free download on iTunes or whatever. It was their first single, I think, and she got that and just fell in love with Walk the Moon. So she was around, and then so she was around from the very beginning of this band essentially, and then once they blew up, they kind of priced her out almost in some of the concerts and stuff. But yeah, so it's cool to have that. I think I might have got this for her as a gift. I guess I can put it back over here. Hey, Big Guys 45s, thank you so much. Thanks for being here and checking it out. And yeah, thank you for the congratulations. I couldn't have done it without all of you, obviously. So super cool to have people here. All right, back into my wife's vinyl. We've got this album called Just Kids by Matt Kearney. Matt Kearney is super underrated. He's a really good singer-songwriter, kind of a little bit more folky vibe, but yeah, super great person, super great artist. This was, again, one of my wife's favorite albums when she was in high school and college, so super happy we could have that for her. This is an album that my wife specifically wanted me to tell you guys has the same vibe as Rumors from Fleetwood Mac. It's Mr. Wives' Super Bloom. Mr. Wives is fronted by a female singer. I cannot remember her name. My wife would know it. She's at work. But female singer who was married to the drummer in the band. And they went through a divorce while they were writing and working on this album. So it's got a lot of those same emotions as Rumors. A little bit less bitter, but a little bit more heartbreak than bitter feud between band members. But great album. Mandy Lee, I think that's the name of the singer. She's an incredible vocalist. Definitely worth a listen if you haven't heard this one. I'm not the biggest Mr. Wives fan, but they put on a great show. We've seen them several times, and this album is really good. They're really good musicians. She's a really good singer, really good performer. So, thanks, Marcus. This album is one that I listened to back when it came out, kind of forgot about it, and then re-listened to it at the start of this year, and fell in love with it. It's probably now in my top 15 favorite albums of all time. It's Turnover, Peripheral Vision. It's kind of the best post-emo, post-pop punk album that I think I've ever heard. It's so good, a little bit atmospheric, a little bit shoegazy, just really, really solid album. I wish I liked the actual band more. I haven't really connected with any of their follow-up albums, but this one, super good. I really recommend this if you haven't heard it. And then we've got an album, another one that's in probably this one is top 10 of all time for me. It's newer. I think it came out, not this 2021, no, 2023. And it's actually the band of the shirt I'm wearing. It's the Rex Sonder. It's very pop rock, indie rock. But it's really good. It like really hits exactly what I'm looking for in albums. So if you haven't heard the Rex, I would definitely recommend listening to Sonder. Such a good album. They're working on a new one. They just released a single, so the new album should be coming out early next year, I would think. Super excited for that. The Rex are probably my favorite active coming up band. There's a couple others that I don't have vinyls for that I wish I did, like Bad Nerves and Royal Otis, who are doing really cool stuff right now, and I need to get their vinyls. But the Rex, Sonder, super cool. Then we have my favorite pop album that released last year. I really like pop music. That might be controversial on this channel. I know I have a lot of punk fans who have subscribed to me, but I like pop music. It's pop music. You're supposed to like it. It's Maisie Peters, The Good Witch. She is a British singer-songwriter. I did like a artist in 1 minute short about her, so that's on the channel if you want to just like briefly learn her story. But she came up through YouTube originally. She got signed to a major, didn't work out, then got signed to Ed Sheeran's label. So she's kind of his protege in a way. Like, she was one of the first artists signed to his label. She's opened for him on tour. She opened for Taylor Swift in London. So she's super solid. The Good Witch, incredible pop album. Listen to it if you want. I'm a punk fan. Awesome. So I'm Not Alone, Noel. Love that. Thank you. Nothing wrong with liking way more than one genre, right? Then we get into a band, another one of my wife's favorites, but I also really love them. I think I found them first and introduced her to them. It's a band called Valley. They're Canadian. This is, I think, their first album, Last Birthday, maybe second. I don't know. They released a couple EPs and then combined those EPs, so I don't really know how that stacks up. But Valley, they're very indie pop. They're got like a little bit of an edge to it, but it's kind of more pop music. Still really good, really worth checking out. We've seen them play live several times, so I definitely recommend them. We have another one of theirs. This is their, I think, newest album, Lost in Translation. I think since this album came out, they lost one of their band members. No, this isn't their newest one. They had one They had one that came out this year that we don't have, but this was the one right before that. But yeah, Valley, good band, worth listening to. And then we have a band called the band Camino. This is a band that has blown up quite a bit. They're a rock band, alternative indie rock band. I first heard them way back in the day, one of the first singles they put out, and I remember listening to it and being like, this band has something, like there's really good there, but this song isn't quite it, so I'm going to pay attention to them, see if they can like do more with it. And then they put out like an EP and an album that blew me away, and I was like, yeah, I was right. Like they did something with it. But they're a band that I loved back in like 2021, and recently I've kind of fallen out of love with them a little bit because this album, this is also the band Camino. It's an album called The Dark. I didn't love this one. It really doesn't have the same interesting elements as the other ones. It just kind of sounds like their old stuff. Like they're not doing anything exciting or interesting with it. So they're losing me a little bit on that. But we also have this. I think this was their first EP called Try Hard. I saw that they were offering it for sale with signatures on it, and I was like, all right, cool. I'll buy that because I love this EP. So have that. Where's Ajax? Ajax he's right here. He was taking a nap. I'm surprised he didn't get up when I was talking because he doesn't like me talking to people that aren't him. But he is right here. He'll be in his little chair taking a nap probably. Now that I woke him up, he'll probably be around more. Do you want to say anything? Our other cat, his sister's like wandering around, so he's on edge about that. He doesn't really love his sister. Ugh. There's Ajax. Okay, next. Catfish and the Bottlemen. The Ride. I love Catfish and the Bottlemen. Their first few albums are incredible. Just a really good British pub rock band. So if you haven't heard Catfish and the Bottlemen, listen to them. They like broke up recently and then more recently got back together, so I'm not sure the current state of the band. I don't know what they're doing. I don't love my sister either. Well, that's not good. Next, Young the Giant, an album that I loved back in like college when it came out. Haven't really listened to it much since then, but I mean it's solid. It's got Cough Syrup is a beautiful song. Apartment's a good song. Just all around great album. If you haven't heard Young the Giant, you probably have. It's probably been in like commercials or whatever, but check out this album. It's a really solid one. This is a special album just because it is the first album that my wife ever bought for herself. The first record, I should say, the first vinyl. Paper Route's Real Emotion. Paper Route is a band from Nashville. I don't think they're a band anymore. They were like more indie and underground band when we were in college. I think they've kind of moved on and done other things now, but she bought this album, Real Emotion. I think it's their second album. I don't know. We have this thing, or had this thing in Nashville called Live on the Green. If you've ever been to Nashville, if you're from Nashville, you probably remember that. We have an independent radio station that would host this festival in downtown Nashville that was completely free. It was just one main stage and I think a couple side stages. You just show up, you got to go listen to some cool bands completely for free. Paper Route was playing at one of those, so they were selling their merch, so she bought this album there. It was the first vinyl record she ever bought, so it's special because of that. And Live on the Green hasn't been back since COVID, which is a real bummer. It kind of shut down. Obviously, they can't have it during the COVID times, but it hasn't come back, I think, because they just can't really make money on it at all. Like, there's no way. They lose money, and they're an independent radio station. They're not rolling in the money, so bit of a bummer there. We would love to have that back. It was one of the coolest things about Nashville, so it kind of sucks that it's gone. But anyway, all right, pumpkin beer break. Then we have a little R&B type album by Quinn 92, The Story of Us. If you haven't heard Quinn 92, really good vibey music, just kind of R&B, a little bit of hip hop in there, but not much. He's not a rapper in any means, but yeah, The Story of Us, great album. Highly recommend listening to that, or just any Quinn 92 at all, really. This album, I don't really remember why I bought it. It's pretty good. It's called Divorce. The issue is, they used to be called Japan's Girls or whatever, however you say that. They're not called that anymore, and I don't really remember what the name of the band is now. So I wish I could help more with that, but like I could maybe look it up, but I don't know that anyone would care enough. They're a pretty good band, a little rock band. Nothing super interesting. This is Lovely the Band, Finding It Hard to Smile. I loved this album when it came out. It was probably my favorite album of that year. 2018, I guess, is when it came out. Wow, is that old? Wow, okay. It got really popular because of the song... I don't remember. One of these songs was super popular and got like super radio airplay, so people have heard Lovely the Band from that. I had heard them a little bit before then, not trying to be hipstery, just kind of trying to explain it. And yeah, this is a great album. I haven't really loved what they've done since. Kind of the same as the band Camino for me, where they didn't really expand on what they were doing. It's like they hit a formula and decided this is what wins for us, so we're going to stay here. And I don't love that. Like, I want you to start doing something different. Like, take where you started and grow from that. And I just don't feel like they did that. This is a band called Lydia. This is their album, Liquor. Sorry, there's like so much hair floating around. My cats shed a lot. It's like these are on a bottom shelf on my bookshelf, so they kind of collect hair along the bottom edges. So sorry about that. Yeah, Liquor, Lydia. Lydia is it's an emo-y band. He's got a very like a higher falsetto voice. It's a really interesting group. I love Lydia. They're doing really cool stuff, so I recommend checking that album out as well. This is an album that I don't necessarily recommend you checking out. It's a band called Coasts, however you say that. It's just their self-titled, I think, debut album. It's pretty good, just California vibe, indie rock, indie pop album. Nothing great with that one. This is a band that I'm really disappointed in. Sir Sly, You Haunt Me. I adore this album. It's definitely in my top 30 of all time. It's such a cool, interesting little alternative rock album. I do not like the direction they went after this. They like completely changed their sound, which sounds really hypocritical now that I'm saying it, based on what I said about Lovely the band and the band Camino, where I didn't like that they didn't progress. But it's not like they built on this sound. They just kind of put it away and did something completely different. So it's like, I'm not really vibing with their new stuff, but this album is incredible. So Sir Sly, You Haunt Me, listen to that. This is an EP called Blood Harmony by Phineas. Phineas, if you're not familiar, is Billie Eilish's brother and longtime producer and collaborator. Like, he's been a part of basically everything she's done. I'm not the biggest fan of Billie's music. I think she has some good songs, but it's not an artist I regularly listen to. But Phineas is like right up my alley. His stuff is really good. It's a little bit more edgy in a way. It's just less commercial and more arty. I don't know. It's just good. Phineas. I'm bad at explaining albums, which you would think I would be better at by now, but I'm not, so sorry. This is the XX. I don't remember the name of the album, but it's the white one. I think they also have a black one. I got this one in college. My roommate post-college was super big XX fan. He got to see them live. I think Ed Sheeran opened for them back when he went to see them, so he got to see Ed Sheeran in like a tiny club, which is wild. But yeah, they're very kind of electronic, not electronic, but atmospheric. Trying to think of the right words. Kind of toned back a little bit, shoegazy in a way. It's the XX, good vibey atmospheric music. Okay, so that's the end of that section. We've got 4 more sections to get through, but I have to readjust because I only had space for 4 on my table. I have a small table, so I am going to go on intermission real quick so I can reset, bring more albums over, and then we'll get back into doing the other ones. And I think these ones will be ones that people are more interested in. We've got my punk albums. We've got like British invasion rock albums. We've got some nostalgia, so we've got my pop punk albums. So that's coming up. Yeah, hopefully, Marcus, hopefully some of these albums are really interesting to you. I think of those ones, I would recommend Peripheral Vision, Sonder by the Rex for sure, Maisie Peters if you like punk, or like pop, sorry, not punk, she's not punk. Yeah, those would be my 3 to start out with if I had to pick 3 to recommend. Okay, going on break, and then we're going to flip it. I say break, it'll be a minute and a half. Okay. All right, we're back. Making sure mic's working. Cool. There's like a delay. I tried to turn off the delay completely, but didn't work. So first, what should we do first? I don't know if anyone has suggestions. I have a section that's like pop, but like classic pop, like not modern pop. I've got one that's like British invasion, early rock and roll, that type of stuff. And then I've got my nostalgia, which is a lot of like pop punk. I don't know which one to do for. I guess we could do the pop one. I feel like people will care about that one a little bit less. I'm trying to save the good stuff for the end. So, yeah, we'll start there. First, had a Frank for Christmas albums, but Frank Sinatra all the way. I mean, it's Frank. I feel like he's just like the pinnacle of having a vinyl record player, throwing it on. It's like, yeah, it's cool. Not much to say about him. It's Frank Sinatra. You all know him. I know him. You love him. Or you hate him. Kind of in between. Then I have the best of Otis Redding. A lot of these in this section... Oh, I can just hold it here. That might work. A lot of these in this section is just kind of like modern collections of their hit songs, because that's kind of what works the best for some of these older singers. Otis Redding, I think, even though he's incredibly popular, I think he is one of the most underrated musicians in the history of American music. He's so good, both as a performer, his voice is incredible, but he's just like an incredible songwriter. He wrote two of the like best, most loved songs in the history of America with Respect and Dock of the Bay. But like all of his songs are really good. Satisfaction, I guess Mick Jagger wrote that, didn't he? Yeah. Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, My Girl, which he didn't write, I don't think, but still, he did a good cover of it on this. So yeah, so he's a great artist. I think he should have more respect than he typically gets. Next, we have the... Oh, this one is dusty. Don't love that. We have Ella, her collection of original classics, whatever that means, but it's Ella Fitzgerald. We all know her. You should love her. If you don't love her, you're wrong. She's an incredible jazz singer. Not much I can say that you don't know about Ella Fitzgerald already. And then to go along with that, we got probably maybe my favorite vocalist of all time, because of how unique and interesting he is, Louis Armstrong. We got a collection of his classics. I mean, Louis is so interesting. I want to do a video about him, so I probably will eventually. There's a podcast episode that my wife and I did about him that I enjoyed doing. I think the audio quality is really bad on it, but he's such an interesting, unique artist. His presence in the industry, he broke so many barriers. He's really cool and interesting to talk about and to learn about. So look forward to a Louis Armstrong video coming eventually. And then we have one I've already mentioned because of Mr. Wives. We've got Rumors. I think this is a repressing. I don't know how new or recent it is, but I feel like this is an album that every single person is going to have in their repertoire, in their vinyl collection, if you want to call it that. So I have it. Fleetwood Mac Rumors. It's hard to say. It's definitely not underrated, but it's hard to say if it's overrated or properly rated, because it is so popular, but it kind of deserves it. Like, it's an incredible album. So good. Do you listen to like classic country? I saw the Rascal Flats vinyl earlier and it piqued my interest. I like some classic country for sure. I'm actually reading a book right now about the Highwaymen, Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash, Chris Christopherson, Willie Nelson. So might do a Chris Christopherson video. I got another ad, but I do like some classic country. It's not something that I typically go to, but I'm not opposed to it. I think a lot of people, the joke is like, oh, I listen to everything except rap and country, but that's not me. I will listen to any song as long as it's good. I haven't dug as deep into country as I have other genres, just because I grew up surrounded by country music, and I kind of like in my little I don't want to be part of the mainstream crap that I think everyone goes through. I kind of rejected it outright. But now that I'm older, I'm like, oh, there's some really good songs here. So I want to get into it a little bit more, but it's not something that like I regularly go to. I have been listening to a lot of Zach Bryan. I like his new stuff. He's a pretty solid artist. Then another Fleetwood Mac. This is I think the first one they did was Stevie. I got this at like a flea market. So it's a good album. Not as good as Rumors. Got another one that I think everyone probably has in their collection, Thriller. I mean, just the pinnacle of pop albums. I think probably the best pop album ever made. People will probably disagree with me about that, but just kind of changed the game with the fact that like every song could be a hit. Like, you don't have to just have a couple singles and then filler. You can make an album where everything is good. So, Thriller, really cool because of what it did and what it is. Great songs. Now we get into a section of a ton from one artist. Oh, man, a lot more than I thought I had from one artist. One of my favorite artists of all time. So I've just kind of slowly collected all of his album. Probably not all of them. I don't think this is all of them, but it's a lot of them. And some of them came from my dad because it's also one of my dad's favorite artists, but a lot I've just picked up at like McKay's or whatever. And it is Billy Joel. So we got The Stranger, which this is in my top 5 favorite albums of all time. How am I still not good at holding these where you can see them? Like, we've been doing this for an hour and I still can't do that? Anyway, The Stranger, top 5 favorite album for me. Love this album. And then continuing, we'll be in Billy Joel for a minute, so get comfortable. We've got An Innocent Man. This is probably my 3rd favorite of his. It's got Uptown Girl. It's another classic from Billy Joel. I'll try and go faster through Billy. Songs in the Attic, one that I don't love as much. I think this is one I just saw at McKay's, and I was like, I don't have it, so I picked it up. Songs in the Attic, Billy Joel. The Nylon Curtain, one that I'm not a huge fan of, but it is what it is. Some albums I buy just like come with sleeves, so this one's in a little sleeve. No idea why. I don't think it's any more special than any of the other Billy Joel albums, but it's protected. Oh, hey Eric, nice to see you. Nice to meet you. Thanks for stopping into the live and seeing some of my albums. We're over halfway done at this point. Hey, chill dude. Thank you so much for that compliment. Really appreciate that. This might be my least favorite Billy Joel album, The Bridge. Just not a big fan of it. Never really connected with me. Another one that I probably just saw at McKay's. Thought, it's Billy Joel, got to get it eventually. This one is probably my 2nd favorite behind the Stranger, Glass Houses. Love this album. You May Be Right is so good. Still Rock and Roll to Me. All for Lena. Like, it's just so good. So many good pop songs on this. Michael Jackson's not in your collection. Yeah, I mean, it's not really my thing either, but Thriller is just such a classic, and it's so good. Like, I feel like that should at least be in consideration. But if not, to each their own. Everyone likes their own stuff. Nothing wrong with that. Another Billy Joel, 52nd Street. This was one of my dad's. It's great. It's Billy Joel. I'm running out of things to say about Billy Joel. Turnstiles, another Billy Joel. This one is interesting because it's got, I think that's his like stepson at the time, right there on the cover. I think if I'm remembering that correctly, because he was married to a woman. He had like an affair with her while she was married with that kid, and then they ended up getting married. So that's his like stepson. They ended up divorcing, so I don't know if I don't know what that makes them anymore. Ex-stepson? I don't know. Then Street Life Serenade. Solid album. Decent. It was kind of right in the middle for me with Billy Joel albums. Sorry, I've just kind of been tossing them on the floor, and now the stack is all wonky, so I've got to fix that real quick. As you can tell, I'm not super protective of my vinyl. We got Billy Joel Piano Man. What is this? Is this an album? I'm getting my Billy Joel mixed up. Anyway, Billy Joel Piano Man. And then we've got his Greatest Hits, Volume 1 and 2 on vinyl. This is probably one of my most played vinyls, honestly, because you just throw it on, and it's great background music. It's super cool. Okay, chat. My collection is mainly Radiohead, MF Doom. MF Doom is so underrated. One of the best rappers of all time, so he belongs there for sure. Gorillaz is also incredible. So this is my collection. Yeah, I mean, I think MJ belongs in any collection, but to each their own. What was I going to say? Oh, yeah, I don't know if any of you play Spottle. It's like Wordle, if you know, like those daily games where you try and guess an artist, and you can you make a guess, and then it'll tell you if they're male or female, if they are a solo artist or a group, like the group numbers, their rank on Spotify, like their genre and all of that. And one time it was Gorillaz, and it told me they weren't a solo artist, so I didn't even get anywhere close to Gorillaz, and I'm still salty about that because it technically is a solo artist. It's that one guy, but it was looking at like the virtual band as the band and not the guy behind it. So like I'm still salty about that. But anyway, Gorillaz. I should get a Gorillaz vinyl. I love that band. Need to listen to it more anyway. Oh, I got plenty of greatest hits, unfortunately. Chill Dude. I don't say unfortunately. Like some of them you kind of like Elton John greatest hits. You're going to want a greatest hits. You're not going to want a collection of his albums because some of his songs aren't good, but then some are really good. So yeah, old Billy Joel material when he wasn't popular, absolutely. I got to see, my wife got me a present of bringing me to New York to see him play at Madison Square Garden a couple years ago, and it was so cool. Like one of the highlights of my concert-going experience, maybe of my life in general. But yeah, it's sad to see that he's done with that series, but getting the chance to see him at Madison Square Garden, it was in December, so he was playing like Christmas songs too. It was a really cool time. All right, so what do we do next? Do we do pop punk nostalgia or... No, we'll save that. We'll do... This is just kind of British rock and / early rock and roll. That kind of section. It got a little bit hard to separate these into different sections at this point. Yeah, classic hip hop, definitely. I'm going to do a Nas video eventually. I had this idea. I did the Rakim video. I don't know if any of you saw that, but it was like why Rakim is the greatest rapper of all time. And in that comment section, there's a ton of people suggesting other rappers as the greatest. So my thought was, I'm just going to take the most suggested people and do videos about them as well. So it's KRS-One, Nas, and I think LL Cool J was in third place. So just do videos about them and just kind of have it be like a, well, here's all of them. You can decide for yourself which one you think did the most for hip-hop. Anyway, starting off with one of the best albums ever made in this section. Again, early rock and roll, British invasion into just kind of UK rock in general. One of the best albums of all time, the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, kind of defined what a concept album is. It's Brian Wilson's masterpiece. You don't need me to tell you about Pet Sounds. You know what Pet Sounds is. Also, sorry about the light here. There's like a little bit of behind the scenes. There's a window right there, like a door with a window. So whenever I record or live stream at this time of day, the sun is coming directly into it, so it kind of messes everything up. So whenever I record when I'm like off work, like get off work, come home and record, and if you see a video where the lighting is all jacked up, it's probably because I'm recording when I get off work. Yeah. Pet Sounds, Beach Boys. I love the Beach Boys. Fan of them. I discovered the Beach Boys. I say I discovered the Beach Boys. That sounds so stupid. I first heard the Beach Boys when I was probably in middle school. I had no idea who they were. We took a family vacation to a beach house in Florida, and we went to Walmart, and I don't know why, and we were just we're browsing through the CDs, me and my brothers, and I saw a band called the Beach Boys, and I was like, well, we're at the beach, so I'm gonna buy this album, because Beach Boys, I'm at the beach, it fits. And my older brother was like, that's stupid, don't waste your money on that. But it was like a Beach Boys Greatest Hits CD, and I was like, no, I'm doing it. And I bought it, loved it, fell in love with those songs. So joke's on him, I was right. Don't go back to Pet Sounds often, but heavier. Yeah, it's just crazy to see that, like, without Pet Sounds, how much longer it would have taken us to get to without Pet Sounds, Sgt. Pepper's would have been much longer, and then everything Sgt. Pepper's inspired would have been much longer. Like, just Pet Sounds was such a pivotal, massive thing. So even if you don't like it, don't like the Beach Boys, don't like Pet Sounds, you gotta at least respect it, is kind of my opinion. Same way, I don't love Dark Side of the Moon. It's not my favorite. I respect it. Kind of that same vibe. Anyway, carrying on with Beach Boys, we've got Spirit of America. I don't really know this album all that well. I don't know that I've ever listened to it. I think this is one of my dad's that just got shuffled into mine because I kind of pair bands together whenever I get more than one of their vinyl. No Pet Sounds means no Weezer. Yeah, I mean, no Pet Sounds means no a lot of things. It's really crazy. And then I actually have the Best of the Beach Boys Volume 2 twice. So if anyone wants one, let me know. But I think I already had one that I bought, and then my brother got me one for like a Christmas gift or something. So I've got the Best of the Beach Boys Volume 2 twice. And then we go into the golden rock hits of Jerry Lee Lewis. Jerry Lee Lewis, obviously one of the, I would say, more forgotten members of that golden age of rock and roll. I mean, you know your Chuck Berrys, you know your Elvises, you know those people. Jerry Lee Lewis had a couple hits, so he kind of gets lost because, you know, he's not as big as those other guys, but he did a lot. He was super interesting. I actually have, you can't see it, this book, Jerry Lee Lewis, His Own Story by Rick Bragg. This is probably the best music biography I've ever read. It's so good. I actually liked it so much that I bought this first edition copy signed by Rick Bragg. So I don't know if you can see that, but it's, oh, that way. So such a, like, Rick Bragg is such a good storyteller, especially when it comes to telling Southern stories, and Jerry Lee Lewis is a typical Southern boy with a really crazy story, so it's just a really good mix-up. Recommend that book if you're interested in it. Anyway, Golden Rock Hits of Jerry Lee Lewis. I think I also got that at a flea market. I was just looking around and found it. Then we got this one, just Elvis Presley. Like, you kind of have to have Elvis. I think this is just some of his, like, Sun Records things. I don't know. We got Blue Suede Shoes. We got Tutti Frutti, which probably is not nearly as good as Little Richard's. Blue Moon. Yeah, just feel like it's Elvis. You know Elvis. And then probably my favorite, at least in terms of music, of that early golden age of rock and roll, Chuck Berry. I got just his greatest hits, essentially, the Great 28. Some of them are, I mean, obviously, it's Chuck Berry. Without him, we wouldn't have the Beatles. Without him, we wouldn't have any of the, I say we wouldn't have, we may not have had the UK invasion, as the British invasion, as much as we did. He inspired so many of those bands. So I think John Lennon called him like the king. He's just, he kind of created rock and roll in a way. But some of these songs are all about teenage girls, and it's really weird. It's really creepy. Don't love that about this era of music. But Chuck Berry's still good. I think I might have told the story at some point, but like the first time I ever heard Chuck Berry was his song My Ding-a-Ling, which is not his style at all. But of course, I was in like high school or middle school and I heard it and I thought it was so funny. And it is funny, but yeah, first time. This next album was a Christmas gift, but I love this band, so it was a great gift. It's The Who's Greatest Hits, another band that I probably should do a video on, and I want to do a video on, but it's one of those bands that's like talked about so much already that like if I did a video on it, it's what would be the point? What would it help? It's kind of like the Beatles thing, where it's like, everyone's done stuff on the Beatles. Everyone's talked about it. Like, how could I add to this conversation? I like to cover a little bit more obscure, lesser known bands, but also part of the reason why I make videos is so that I can learn about the bands. Like, I choose bands that I want to learn about. I say that this channel is me learning music history, and hopefully other people want to watch me do that. So maybe The Who would be worth that, because I want to learn more about that band. Elvis didn't write his songs. Yeah, a lot of people didn't write their songs back then. I feel like that's kind of a big misconception. Like Frank Sinatra didn't write his songs. Aretha Franklin didn't write Respect. Otis Redding did. Like, it's just kind of what you did. You just kind of covered popular songs back at that point. Some people changed that, obviously. Chuck Berry wrote some of his own stuff. Buddy Holly was writing his own songs, but that was kind of a new thing when Elvis was coming up. A lot of the major singers back then didn't write their own stuff. So I feel like that gets a little bit overblown these days, but I kind of get it, considering you can also see him kind of ripping off some of the African-American culture by doing what he did. Not the biggest Elvis fan. Yeah, I'm not the biggest Elvis fan either. Oh, that's why you say Elvis didn't write his songs. Okay, sorry, I was behind on that. Yeah, Elvis I respect what he did. He did do a lot. As this is not me saying it, this is what I learned by researching some of his stuff. He did a lot to break down the color barrier for rock and for rock and roll. Like people like Little Richard were saying, if Elvis didn't do what he did, wasn't as popular as he was, it would have been much harder for us to get traction in mainstream music. So Elvis did break down a lot of that barrier, which is cool. Yeah, Fiona Apple would be really cool. I don't know much about her, so those are like the more interesting videos for me to do, are artists that I don't know a lot about, but I want to learn more about. Fiona Apple's one of them. And then we were talking about him earlier, so might as well get into the Beatles. We got Abbey Road, which is probably my favorite Beatles album. I'm kind of on record as being not the biggest Beatles fan. They're a band that I greatly respect because of what they did. They're so important, so iconic. Just never really been my thing. And then we have Hard Day's Night. This was a Christmas gift from my sister-in-law, so really cool. It's again, kind of like Michael Jackson. You kind of should have your own. You should have Beatles in there. Who's your favorite Beatle? That's a good question. I played drums in high school, so I'm always inclined to drummers, but Ringo attitude-wise is probably my favorite Beatle, but I don't think he was the most talented. I think it's probably Paul. I think Paul, one of the best pop songwriters of all time. I love pop music, so I feel like it's probably Paul. Paul is always my one pick when people say, like, if you could have just a conversation with any living person, who would it be? Mine would be Paul McCartney, just because he experienced something that no one else has ever experienced with that Beatlemania. Well, him and 3 other people experienced it, so just hearing him talk about what that was like and sharing his stories would be so incredible. Yeah, had a conversation about Elvis. I really like George. George is really underrated. I think he's forgotten a lot. I mean, he's a Beatle. No one forgets any of them, but like people love talking about Lennon and McCartney, but George Harrison was incredibly talented, and he brought a lot to the Beatles that I think goes a little bit unnoticed. Here Comes the Sun is a banger. Yeah. Okay. And then we have, next up, The Best of the Animals. I bought this at a record store back in my hometown the last time I was in. I did a video about the birth of country music last time I was in, and there's like a little record store nearby called Cheap Thrills, I think, and I found this album. I love the Animals. I think they're a very underrated British invasion band, so this is a fun one to have. Again, it came with the little sleeve, so I left it in the sleeve. Doesn't seem like it needs a sleeve. I think George was the best at his given instrument. Yeah, I would agree with that. Unless you would say, this is very not right philosophically, unless you would say songwriting was Lennon and McCartney's instrument, then they might have been better songwriters than George was a guitar player, but just instrumentally, yeah, George was definitely the best. There's a whole like discussion about, is Ringo Starr a good drummer or not? And I think that's a really interesting one. Obviously, he's a good drummer, but like, how good of a drummer is he? I think he's kind of the pinnacle of staying in your lane as a drummer, like knowing what the song needs and staying there. So I think for that, he's good. I think you don't want to overpower the rest of the band, especially a band like the Beatles. So he was the perfect drummer for that band. Sorry, Pete Best. And then we get into a couple Led Zeppelin albums. We've got 2, and I think it was just 3, right? No, Physical Graffiti. I thought I had 3. Anyway, I don't listen to a ton of Led Zeppelin. Every time I listen to them, I leave being like, they're incredible. I need to listen to them more. And then I just kind of forget to. But Led Zeppelin, obviously, super great band. Happy to have some of their vinyl. Of course, this one came in a sleeve again. Don't know why. My stack's getting out of control again. All right, then we got another Greatest Hits. We've got Queen Greatest Hits. I think this was another Christmas present from my parents. This one was a big winner. It's Queen. It's Queen's Greatest Hits. Is it true that Led Zeppelin borrowed some songs? I actually don't know. Led Zeppelin's a band that I don't know a ton about, but that would be interesting to look into to see if that is true. And I guess it depends on what you mean by borrowed. Like, was it just a cover song that they didn't properly attribute, or that people just assumed they didn't? I don't know. That'd be interesting to look into. Then we got a couple more Queen. We've got The Game. Very fun little holographic, taking me back to my Pokemon days. And then we've got A Night at the Opera by Queen. Really interesting cover on this one. It's Queen. Don't know. Oh, like plagiarism? Well, that's not good. But yeah, I don't know. Haven't heard that, so it'd be interesting to look into it. Yeah, so many of the British invasion bands, they definitely took from the early rock and rollers, which was Chuck Berry, Jerry Lee Lewis, Buddy Holly, which are kind of southern sounding. Oh, who was the guy? I was going to say Bo Diddley. Bo Diddley did a lot to give like rock and roll its rhythm, and I think he's forgotten a lot in talking about that. So people borrowed a lot from him as well, but I would say more inspired. But yeah, it's all just this cyclical thing. But yeah, rock and roll kind of came out of country music mixed with R&B, which was all, or mixed with blues, sorry, which is all very southern. So once they started getting that imported on ships, and people like in Liverpool, where there was a lot of docks, could get these imported American records that weren't available everywhere, that's what kind of started that UK explosion. Then this album, Roxy Music, very influential for a lot of bands I really love, even if I don't listen to Roxy all that much. This was a Christmas gift from my father-in-law, who actually worked in the music industry for a bit when he was younger. He was a producer. He worked in audio production. I think he was in sound engineer, actually. So he really loves the production element of stuff. He loves like the actual how recordings sound, which is something that isn't really my thing. I'm way more interested in the song itself than the way the recording sounds. So he got me that album because he was like, you just have to, like, this is just a marvel of production, so you would appreciate it, and I do. So question is extremely off topic. Did you ever attend university? If so, what university have you attended? I attended MTSU, Middle Tennessee State University in Murfreesboro. I graduated in 2015 with a degree in the music business. So learned music business, even though I decided in my senior year, my last semester, that I did not want to work in the music business. I still was like, I'm close enough, I'm going to graduate anyway. So yeah, got my degree in music business from MTSU. That's kind of how I got into music history. I took music history classes through that. MTSU is one of the best music schools in the country, definitely in Tennessee, but I think in the country in general, just because of how close it is to Nashville and the connections and all of that. I'm actually a student there now again. I'm in graduate school there, just started back last semester. I'm trying to get an English master's degree. So towards the end of the semesters when videos get less frequent, that's because I'm in the middle of writing long essays, or doing final papers or projects or whatever. So sorry if that gets busy. I'm actually doing my final paper this semester on Patti Smith, not Joni Mitchell, Patti Smith, and how the French symbolist poet Arthur Rimbaud kind of influenced her to create rebellious anti-establishment art, and then how that spread into the punk movement in general. So I think that's a really cool connection. It's cool that I get to like be at a university studying that particular thing. And I'll probably do a video about that connection once I'm done with it, if I think it's good enough anyway. George was the most talented musician of the four. Yeah, probably. Okay, so we have 2 stacks left. We've got my... got fuzzies on my hand. We've got what I call my nostalgia stack. It's a lot of bands that I loved in like high school, a lot of like early 2000s pop punk. And then we've got like the punk, I guess you would call it, the punk stack. So let's start with the pop punk stuff. This is one that filtered into nostalgia, even though it's not pop punk, but Elephant by the White Stripes, super solid. I bought this at Third Man Records, which is Jack White's record studio. That's here in Nashville. I went there in college and I saw this and I was like, I feel like I have to buy this at his record studio. So I picked that up there. Solid alternative rock album. Patti Smith's book was very enjoyable. Which one? The Just Kids? This one? Because I actually have this one signed by Patti Smith, which is cool. Part of my book collection I was talking about earlier in the video. She's written a couple other ones. She wrote one called M Train that I read through as part of my research for this project. I didn't love that one as much. Then she has like books on poetry, or books of poetry, which I'm not really into poetry, so it was kind of hard. We have Yellow Card, Ocean Avenue, one of the best pop punk albums of all time. Just fantastic album. 1 second. I'm going to close my blinds and maybe that'll help with this intense, like, heaven light here. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. I think that's a little bit better, so that's good. And then we have, I'm a big, I was, less so now, but still enjoy it, pop punk fan. I've never liked Paramore. I don't know why. They have never connected with me. They were always one of my brother's favorites growing up, and we had this weird, I don't know, rivalry where, like, at least at the start, it was very much like, well, if you like that band, I can't like them. And he adopted Paramore, so maybe that influenced it a little bit, but I just never really got into them. This was the only album that I, like, actually really enjoyed, which is surprising to people because of Riot, but I don't know, I like this. So when I saw a couple years ago, Grimies was doing, like, a release of this album on vinyl, I was like, yeah, I'll pick that up. So, again, Grimies is my local record store in Nashville. And then we have a more modern pop punk album. Yeah, Just Kids is a really good book. It's really interesting. She's a good storyteller. It's an interesting story, but also just her, like, ruminations on what it means to be an artist and what it means to kind of live that bohemian lifestyle is really interesting. So, yeah, if you haven't, you should read Just Kids. It's really cool. We've got Wake Up Sunshine by All Time Low. This is probably one of my favorite, more recent pop punk releases. I haven't just, like, loved a pop punk album in a long time, but my wife and I listened to this and we both really enjoyed it. It's a really cool, just pop rock. Just, it's more poppy, but yeah, give it a listen. Why am I going out of focus? Get it together, camera. Then we got Avril Lavigne. Skater Boy, Complicated. It's Avril Lavigne. We saw her on her Greatest Hits tour a couple months ago, I think. That's what inspired me to make a video about her first band, because we were watching her perform, and while she was performing, she would occasionally, like, put the old music videos on the screen behind her while she was singing it. So she was singing Complicated with the old Complicated video behind it, and I just got to thinking, whatever happened to those guys in it? Like, who were they? What did they go on to do after this Complicated video? So that inspired a whole video on my channel. You can go check that out. You'd never heard an Avril Lavigne song? Wow, that's kind of great. I guess depending on your age, because, like, I grew up in the height of Avril Lavigne. Like, she got started 2003, maybe. That was, like, she was big all through my elementary, middle, and high school time. So, yeah, I was just always around Avril Lavigne. Never really loved any of her stuff beyond that album, though. Then we got very controversial band, Good Charlotte. We got their debut album. They're self-titled. I love it. I think it's fantastic. A lot of people really hate this band, so you're free to like what you like. You're free to dislike what you dislike. Then I also have their Young and the Hopeless. I've said before, long ago on this channel, that The Young and the Hopeless was my introduction to music, essentially. There's kind of a longer story about how I ended up with this album, but I didn't really get music at all. I didn't know music. And then my brother bought this album and gave it to me, and it kind of just awakened me to music. This was the first album that I just, like, fell in love with, memorized every word, understood what it meant, and then that transitioned into this album, Mayday Parade, A Lesson in Romantics, which really cemented it, because I heard this album when I was in middle school, and I still think this is the pinnacle of that mall pop punk, angsty, teenage emo era. Like, this is the best album to come out of that, I think. This album was the first one I listened to that I was like, I get it, because you're in 6th, 7th grade, you're going through all these emotions and all these feelings, and you think you're the first person who's ever felt it. You think you're completely alone in what you're feeling. And then I listen to an album like this, and I'm like, oh, I'm not alone. These people understand what I'm going through. They've singing about it, like, they've felt the same stuff. So just helps you feel less alone as a kid, even though like it seems silly now, but it's very important back when you're that age. So I'll always love A Lesson in Romantics because of that. And then from there, this album really just kind of like catapulted my love of music. So I got another Mayday Parade, Monsters in the Closet. I really kind of stopped listening to them after A Lesson in Romantics. Their primary songwriter, Jason Lancaster, left the band after A Lesson in Romantics. So I think they got a lot worse after that. I think they kind of got it together a little bit for later albums, especially their self-titled, where that was pretty decent, but they never recaptured that magic of A Lesson in Romantics because they just didn't have their songwriter and co-lead vocalists, like they had dual vocals. So Monsters in the Closet, I don't know why I got that. I think it was like a pre-order in college or something. And I was like, all right, might as well. I got a record player now. Might as well buy my own vinyl instead of just listening to my dad's. All right, we got a couple really solid albums, actually. Up next, we've got Bright Eyes. I'm Wide Awake, It's Morning. I always forget the name of this album. It's just fantastic, like emo singer-songwriter kind of folky vibe. If you're not familiar with Bright Eyes or Connor Oberst, he could be worth an entire video. He's a really interesting, kind of tragic musician, singer-songwriter, so could be worth talking about more in depth. Bright Eyes has some great songs, incredible music. So this is my favorite album by Bright Eyes, by Connor Oberst in general. He had another album he did as a solo artist. Ruminations maybe? I can't remember the name of it, but that one was really solid too. I loved that one. Came out in 2016, 2017, somewhere around there. And then we've got up next is another one of my favorite albums of all time. Brand new Deja Entendu. I can't pronounce things. We all know this. Super solid emo rock album. Fortunately, Brand New kind of fell into that whole bands getting canceled for things that happened. So they've not doing anything anymore, but this album's still one of my favorites of all time. Highly recommend it if you haven't heard it. And this is like a greatest hits of the first 10 years of the band Silverstein. They're a little bit more of a hardcore screamo type band. My friend, one of my best friends, got this for me as a Christmas present. We went to see Silverstein open for August Burns Red. So we both left being like, Silverstein's so much better than we thought they were. So he remembered that, got this for me for Christmas. Really nice, really good songs on here. This is another album I picked up in college. Don't really listen to this band or this album anymore, but Memphis Mayfire, Unconditional. They're like a Christian screamo band. They're kind of strange. The singer's Matty Mullins, I think. I think he's now also the singer for a different band that I can't remember the name of. What do you think about the Warped Tour comeback? I shared this a little bit. I did a whole video about Warped Tour. I talked a little bit about my thoughts about it at the end of it. I'm very torn because I loved Warped Tour. Warped Tour was like a staple of the scene I grew up in and the scene that introduced me to music. So having it come back is interesting. It's exciting. It's like kind of feels like coming home a little bit again. But at least Warped Tour as it is right now doesn't seem like Warped Tour to me. The joy of Warped Tour was that it was a tour. It came to you. It wasn't a destination thing. You didn't travel to it. It came to you, and then you got to just go have one day seeing all of these bands, and then it would move on. And that, like, so novel, so different. And now the way it exists now, where it's just 3 cities across, like, 5 months, 2 days per city, that doesn't feel like Warped Tour to me. That just feels like a couple different pop-punk festivals that are happening. Like, it feels like the When We Were Young festival. Like, I have to travel to it. I have to get planes, like get a flight and get a hotel, and that's just not Warped Tour to me. I'll be interested to see what bands are announced. Part of the joy of Warped Tour was how it broke under like not unsigned, but unknown bands. So I'm hoping they do that again. I hope they have a good mix of like the heavy hitters and kind of lesser known bands. But yeah, I did end up getting tickets. My brother lives near Washington, D.C., so I got tickets to go see the Washington, D.C. dates. We'll see how it is. Maybe I'll post a recap video once I'm done. Speaking of the heavy hitters, we got a couple from A Day to Remember. We've got For Those Who Have Heart, one of their earlier albums. One of my favorite bands from this genre, honestly, and this is just a really solid early example of their work. Then we've got a more recent example of their work with You're Welcome. I think this one was underrated. People didn't give this one the respect I think it was due. Brick Wall, Mind Reader, FYM, High Diving, all great songs. So I think if you haven't listened to this, could be worth it. Problem with rock festivals in general is a lot of them are focused on legacy acts. Yeah, I think that's very true. I think that's just kind of the state of hard rock specifically in general right now. I think the radio, the festivals, all of that are so focused on those bigger acts that they're not willing to bring in the other, like your Metallicas, your Anthrax, like your people who are going to bring in a crowd. They're not willing to go out on a limb and bring in new people, which I think is kind of doing a disservice to it. There are other ones like Bad Omens is blowing up right now. So I think there's other stuff you could do, but yeah, the kind of like metal scene in particular, I think is really, really struggling by just being stuck in the past. Yeah, and rock in general is a very looking back at me. Yeah. When rock first started, it was very much revolutionary and new and about the youth and looking forward. But I think that's kind of faded now into more of a nostalgia thing. So yeah, rock's in a weird spot right now, and I'm hoping it'll turn around because rock is my favorite genre. So I'm hoping things will come back around with it, but who knows? And then lastly, on A Day to Remember, Homesick. I did a video a long time ago about the 5 albums that changed my life. This was one of them. At the time, I didn't own this. This is a new release. So this is the one that kind of introduced me to heavier music. It was the first album outside of just like super poppy. Like it's not heavy metal, but it is more heavy metal than people like Mayday Parade or Good Charlotte. So like I remember I was listening to like The Downfall of Us All and Monument, which isn't on this but is another Day to Remember song, on like a bus field trip, and just fell in love with them. So that kind of changed that. It's a cool album cover. Yeah, I'm assuming you're talking about Homesick. It is really cool. It will also look forward, and it limits creativity. Like you can't get stuff like new metal. Yeah, I get that for sure. I also think it's because I've been thinking a lot about, I love that CBGB era of music. The early days where you would have bands like Patti Smith and Television and Blondie and Talking Heads all playing in this tiny club, and it was a community. And even if you look at like the 80s with the NYHC scene where you had like Agnostic Front, Murphy's Law, Cro-Mags, all operating in this little insular community and creating new, exciting music in this community that then branched out. I was just thinking, like, I don't really have that anymore. Like, that doesn't exist. I'm in Nashville. I'm in Music City. There's not really, like, a little club scene in here. Like, I would still have to pay, like, $25 to get into our smallest venue here. Like, it just doesn't really exist anymore. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, could that exist in the age of the internet where everything is so much more global and accessible? Is it even possible for a scene like that to exist anymore? And it's an interesting thought experiment. I think it could exist online, and maybe I'm just not a part of it, and that's why I don't know it. But it seems hard for me to believe that like an entire scene centered around tiny clubs in a city could exist anymore. Yeah, everything has been done. Yeah. What are you talking about? The five spot OG basement? OG basement, yeah. I mean, I don't know the 5 spot, honestly. I'm not hip to that, I guess. Basement, I still feel like it's not local bands, and it's still a little bit more expensive to get into. So, like, I'm not going to pay $5 to get in and see, like, it'll be more, it's like it's not as accessible, and also with Nashville not having transit, harder to get to, harder to park. Since Georgia scene is pretty close, they have 2 free fests. That is cool. And that's what I was talking about earlier with like Live on the Green in Nashville. That was a really cool way to get a music community more involved in the city. It feels so scattered now. It feels like there's so many different things. I don't know. It's weird. It's a weird era we live in for music. Some of it's good. I really like the internet has made it possible for me to hear so many new bands and other artists, and that's cool. But yeah, I feel like we're missing a little bit of that like local community as much. Okay, so keep going with some albums. Into It, Over It, proper. I think I bought this at a bookstore back when I was in college. Don't remember much about it. I do know that Into It Over, it's a pretty good band, but don't really remember that album as much. Bayside, pretty solid, just a little pop punk emo band. What's this album? Sirens and Condolences. I think I saw them at Warped Tour when I went back in high school. Not high school, college. The Cab, Cab, Whisper War. If you don't know The Cab, super poppy. They started incorporating elements of like electronic music into pop punk, but did it in, I think, a cool way, a better way than bands like Blood on the Dance Floor and Millionaires, who did it in a super obnoxious, terrible way. So The Cab, it's a really interesting band. I think their other album, Symphony Soldier, is probably better than that one, but that one's more nostalgic for me. I think music in general is really good, like modern pop music. Yeah, there's a lot of bands doing really, really cool stuff right now. I just think that kind of like insular community that then explodes, it's hard for me to imagine that happening again, at least as it stands right now. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope I'm just not involved in it and it is happening, but because I've heard people talk about like SoundCloud rappers are kind of doing a similar thing where they're breaking down what it means to make music and making interesting new stuff. So maybe there is stuff happening and I'm just not around. Modern baseball, sports. Modern baseball is a classic of that kind of, I think they're Midwest, but that kind of like Midwest emo sound at least. So Modern Baseball, solid band. And then the Wonder Years. The Wonder Years are one of my favorite pop punk bands. I've seen them several times. They're solid. This is Suburbia, I've Given You All, and I'm Left With Nothing. Oh, and Now I'm Nothing. This is their first 3 albums, starting with The Upsides, and then this one, and then The Greatest Generation. I think is maybe one of the best 3 album runs in the history of pop punk. All 3 albums are incredible. This is probably my least favorite of the 3, but it's the one that I saw for sale, so I bought that one, and they're all good. Okay, so that's my nostalgia thing. Am I caught up? Yeah, looks like I'm caught up on the chat. Then we have one little section left, and then we're done. So this is my kind of like punk section, I guess, for lack of a better word. I think they're all punk. Yeah, we'll see what you think. First, I mentioned at the start of this, which you might not have been around for, I have like one hardcore punk album, which might surprise people considering that's kind of a lot of what I've covered on this channel. But the way I listen to vinyl is more of an atmosphere setting thing. I will put it on when I am working from home, when I'm writing, when I'm doing homework, when I'm cleaning, when friends are over playing board games or whatever. Hardcore punk is not the best for that because those songs kind of demand you pay attention to them, and that's just not the way I listen to vinyl. So I haven't bought Black Flag, Minor Threat, Agnostic Front. I haven't bought those albums because it just doesn't make sense for the way I listen to vinyl. But the one hardcore album I do have is Bad Brains, Eye Against Eye. This is probably my favorite hardcore album anyway. So it's actually not in here right now because it's on the record player. I was listening to it earlier. So I picked that up in Austin at Waterloo Records. Super cool store. You own any Green Day? I actually don't. Green Day is one of those bands that I really respect what they did. It's never really clicked with me for some reason. I never really loved them as much. I've started liking them more as I've gotten older, but I was in 9th grade when American Idiot came out. I was kind of around their heyday, and just for some reason, they never connected with me, so I don't have any of theirs, but I'm not opposed to it. Another album I picked up at Waterloo Records in Austin, Buzzcocks, Singles Going Steady. I did a Buzzcocks video recently. Watch that if you want. I love Buzzcocks. They're so good. And Singles Going Steady, I think, is just... If you don't know, they put out that album in order to introduce the American market to their singles, to their biggest songs before they came to play in America. They just compiled a bunch, sent it out into America, and were like, here's what Buzzcocks are. Listen to that. Be prepared for them to come. So it's just a really good collection of their early work, of who they are, what they sounded like, how they kind of progressed. So super good. If you're going to get into Buzzcocks, listen to them. And then next up, we have what I think it's going to be a very controversial opinion, so be prepared to fight about this in the comments. I think the best punk album ever made, London Calling by The Clash. And I know people are going to be like, oh, everyone says that. But I could see it being controversial. I love this album so much. It's one of my top 10 for sure. Just the way they incorporated different styles into punk at a time where not many people were doing that. I mean, this was released 1979 in England, 1980 in America, I believe. So pretty early on, and they're inspiration for so many people. London Calling, just pinnacle of punk in my mind. But also we have this album. Is this just self-titled? I guess so. I found this at McKay's, as I was saying. Don't love this one as much, but I get where it was coming. Too money-centric, there'd be a new genre pop up. Yeah, which is, I think we're kind of there. Like, I feel like we're in a era where everything just sounds so watered down, but I'm worried that with, like, social media, we don't really have that room for things to pop up. I don't know. It's worth more thought, because I don't really know that I have my thoughts together with that. But yeah, it's just like, it feels like these days artists are rewarded and are only seen if they play to the algorithms, if they create a viral song. And the way to do that is not by creating something new and exciting. So there probably is a lot of people making interesting, exciting new music. We're just not going to hear it unless you're in that scene already. The best punk album, in my opinion, is Marquee Moon. That's a good shout. I think it depends on if you consider that punk or proto-punk. And there's a very fine line there that I don't know that I am the one to bridge that gap. Does everyone else get an ad at the same time I do? I have it open over here, so I don't know. I don't know if I should stop talking while an ad is on or not, is what I'm getting at here. But yeah, Marquee Moon, I don't know. I don't know if it's punk or if it's proto-punk. I think it's right on that line. But yeah, Marquee Moon's solid album. Not going to complain if people say it's the best. Same way I won't complain if people say that this is the best punk album. Never mind the bollocks. Here's the Sex Pistols. The more and more I research the UK music scene, the more it stands out to me just how important the Sex Pistols were. So many people saw the Sex Pistols and were like, that's what I want to do. Like, they can do it, I'm doing it. Like, this is it. Like, even like Adam Ant did that. I posted a video about Adam and the Ants earlier today, so go watch that if you want. But Adam Ant was inspired by the Sex Pistols. Buzzcocks were inspired by the Sex Pistols. The Clash, like, all that whole scene was like grew up around the Sex Pistols. So, although I don't think the songs on this album are as good as the songs on London Calling, or even Marquee Moon, its importance makes me consider it as one of the best punk albums of all time. Television are somehow proto-punk and yeah, I mean, you're not wrong about that. But speaking of post-punk, I've got this from the Smiths. I bought this in college. I think this is Meat is Murder. I didn't know really anything about the Smiths. I just knew that bands I liked referenced them and movies I liked talked about them. So I was like, they must be good. I bought this album, listened to it. I didn't really get it at the time. Now I really love it. I really love the Smiths. But at the time, I don't know. Maybe my musical palette wasn't refined enough to really get what they were going for. Okay, so I think that's most of like the UK scene. And now we're getting into the CBGB scene of punk music. Most of my punk is, as I kind of talked about earlier, early punk. Like, I love the 70s punk. Like, I've not really got any 80s punk or even modern punk. So you're going to get a lot of that early CBGB scene with these next two albums. Starting it off with the album that really kind of kicked everything off. The Ramones debut. Again, I don't have a lot of first pressings. This is a repress, but this album, it's really hard to overstate its importance. It came out and just kind of shocked the world, and I say the world, not everyone was listening to it, but it just, like, people were like blown away by this. Really solid. It's kind of a little bit more juvenile than some of the other punk albums that were coming out around that time, but hard to overstate its importance. Early punk isn't really my thing because of just how like low quality. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, especially some of the proto-punk stuff. But that's kind of also the reasoning why I don't listen to a ton of, especially early hardcore punk. A lot of that is kind of unlistenable to me. Like, I'm working on a video about the Cro-Mags right now. I'm deep into research on that, and I've been listening to some of their stuff. It's so hard to listen to because, I mean, their studios weren't great, the producers weren't great, the musicians weren't great. So all of that kind of combines into like this just doesn't sound the best, but the beauty of it was the live show. It was seeing it performed live. It wasn't really to be recorded. So I think you miss something by just listening to the recordings like I have to do since I wasn't there. But yeah, that's why I don't listen to a ton of hardcore punk. It's for that same reason. Then also to go along with the Ramones debut LP, I have this Ramones 1975 Sire demos. This was a Record Store Day exclusive release this past year. I didn't buy it on Record Store Day, but a few months after that, I stopped by a record store in my hometown, and I found it there, and I was like, this is great. This is the one I wanted from Record Store Day. So it's just cool. It's a lot of the songs that are on the debut LP, honestly, just kind of like in a more rough format and then a couple different songs. So it's a cool release, cool thing to have. Check out Wipers. Huh. Okay. I'll check them out for sure. I'm not familiar with them. Then we have my Blondie section. Blondie is one of my favorite bands. I love Blondie. And so I got several of their albums, starting with my favorite, Parallel Lines. This is probably top 5 favorite album of all time for me. Love Parallel Lines. I don't think there's a bad song on this album. Just so many interesting things incorporating. Like, it's kind of, as I talked about in the Adam and the Ants video, it kind of bridges that gap between, like, punk and new wave, even though people called punk new wave at the time as well. It's kind of its own thing. So it kind of is one of those bridge things. But yeah, Parallel Lines, really, really good album. Love it. Then we have Eat to the Beat, one of their other albums that I don't love as much, but still got some solid songs on there. Can't really go wrong with Debbie Harry. And then we've got Auto American. Yeah, just another good Blondie album. Clem Burke, such a good drummer. I think he's very underrated. Chris Stein is a pretty good songwriter, who I also think is a little underrated. Then we have Plastic Letters. I think this might be my second favorite behind Parallel Lines. I think for some reason this one just really sticks out to me. Really like it. And then finishing up Blondie, we got just their debut Blondie LP. I do think Ex Offender is funny, that they had to just call it Ex Offender instead of Sex Offender. I think that's funny. All right. I really like that lo-fi sound of like Jay Dillon in utero, but early punk is just, yeah, definitely. I get, yeah, like it's weird because it's like I bet I would love a lot of these bands more if I had seen them live, but because of geography, because of time, like just didn't get that chance, so I didn't really get to see them live and changed it a little bit. Anyway, carrying on with early CBGB, we got Remain in Light by the Talking Heads. This was an album that I first listened to back when I was listening through Rolling Stone's 100 Greatest Albums of All Time list. And I listened to this and I was like, I think I only really knew Psycho Killer from Talking Heads. And then I listened to this and I was like, holy crap, this is really good. And it's kind of what inspired me to make a video about Talking Heads, which is on the channel now if you want to watch it. It's one of my more popular videos, so you might have already seen it. But yeah, such a good album. Love that album. And then I have their 77. I think this was their debut, right? If I remember correctly. But yeah, just Talking Heads, super good, super underrated. Well, I guess they're not underrated. Everyone loves them, but super good band. Next, we have an album that I bought for a video, actually. My first ever most popular video, Devo. I didn't really know much about Devo when I started working on the video, so I was like, I should probably listen to their music. I saw this album for a few bucks on eBay, so I picked it up. It's a really interesting one. Yeah, I mean, it's freedom of choice. Sorry for the people not actually watching to see it. Devo's such an interesting band. Watch that video if you want more information about what they were trying to do. Apparently Radiohead got the name from a Talking Head song. Yeah, I mean, that would make sense. That sounds like it belongs in a Talking Head song, but I didn't know that. That's interesting. Radiohead's another band that I need to get more into. It's a band that's never fully connected with me. I've listened to a lot of Radiohead, and every time I'm just like, I'm not getting it. Like, I'm not getting what people see in it. But normally whenever I make a video about a band, I end up appreciating them way more. So I feel like I need to do that with Radiohead, even though so many people have already made videos about them. And then, speaking of Marquee Moon, we've got Television Marquee Moon. Incredible album. I think this is maybe one of the most underrated punk albums. It's, if we call it punk, had the whole discussion earlier, but it's just, I keep saying so good a lot, but it is so good. It's very revolutionary in what it did. It kind of brought more artistry into that punk scene than was happening. Tom Verlaine, Patti Smith, that whole scene really set punk on the right foundations, I think. And then talking about the final album, well, not final, I've got a few more, but the final album in this section is one that I think we wouldn't have punk music without it. It's the Andy Warhol, Velvet Underground, and Nico album. And when I was pulling these records out to do this and set them all up is when I noticed that the sticker got peeled on this. And I didn't do that. It must have got peeled when I slid it in to where it was being stored. So now it's just pink, and I don't like that as much. I didn't want it to peel. So I don't have the sticker crumpled to somewhere, unfortunately. But yeah, this album, it was said, everyone's heard it, that not many people listened to the Velvet Underground, but everyone that did started a band. And I think that is very true, especially of this album. The things they were doing on this, writing a song about a drug deal, letting Nico sing, who is not the best vocalist, super revolutionary for the time, changed everything about music that came after it. I just don't think you have punk music without that album. I think you probably would, but it would look very different than it did. All right, so that's all of punk, and I wanted to just end this. There are two bands that I have bought every single vinyl they've ever released. They're two of my favorite bands, so I was just going to run through those real quick to kind of end this off. I will be right back when I have those. They're over there on the floor. All right, we're back. So the first band that I have all of their stuff is a band called Bad Books. They are a little bit more indie rock, folky rock. It's a side project from singer-songwriter Kevin Devine and the lead singer of Manchester Orchestra, Andy Hull. They got together and just started making music. They started with this album, which was just called One. It's got more of a rock feel to it, or kind of alternative rocky sound. Then they went from that to, sorry about that. They went from that to Two, the album Two, which this is probably my favorite album of all time. I love this album so much. Such a good album. I got to see them perform this album when they put it out back in college, probably 2012, I think is when they put this out. And they just played it at 3rd and Lindsley in Nashville, if you know that venue. Super cool. They're so talented. But yeah, Bad Books 2 is an incredible album. It's a little bit more involved than their first one, a little bit less rocky. And then recently, I think last year, they released Two Revisited, which is the same songs, but it's them doing it in a different way. Them taking what they've learned since 2012 when Two was released and incorporating that into redoing the songs the way they would do them now. So it's kind of like their Taylor's version of Two, but the songs are actually different. Taylor's version, songs are the same. They're actually different. They're in a different order. They're performed differently. So it's really interesting just to kind of breathe new life into one of my favorite albums of all time. And then the last album they've put out is just called Three. It's way more acoustic, way more folky vibe. We got to see them perform this album in Chicago. My wife and I drove up to see them perform that. So good. Again, it was just them on stage with a guitar, and it was just so technically beautiful. It was just really good. So Three is an album I didn't love when it first came out because it was too acoustic-y for me. I wanted a little bit more edge, a little bit more bite. But as the years have gone on, it's grown on me a ton. It's become one of my favorite albums of all time. So that's Bad Books. I love Bad Books. Definitely recommend you check them out if you haven't. And then we're getting into the Wombats. The Wombats is another one of my favorite bands of all time. I discovered them back in college when It was back in the era of early social media where some of your friends would just post videos of them doing silly, stupid things that don't really matter. And one was a friend of mine who posted a video of herself and like her friend or her sister, I don't know, lip syncing to random songs and goofing off in their thing. So I was watching that and I heard they lip sync to a snippet of a song and I heard it and I was like, this is incredible. What is this song? And it took me a long time to find it, but I did. And it was Techno Fan off of the Wombats album This Modern Glitch, and that started just like a long love affair with the Wombats. They're like a pop rock UK band. So this is their most recent release, Fix Yourself, Not the World. The artwork is really fun on it. This is not my favorite of their releases. It's got some songs that I really like on it, but it's not my favorite of their releases. Then they had this EP, which is called Is This What It Feels Like to Feel Like This? I think probably underrated in their discography. It's a really good EP, really good songs on it. This is probably the best album they ever made. It's not my favorite, but it's probably the best one. It's called Beautiful People Will Ruin Your Life. It's the one that if you've heard their songs, you've probably heard this one because it's got songs like Turn and Cheetah Tongue and what's their most popular one? Was it off? Anyway, this is the one you've probably heard songs off of. It's arguably their best of all time. It's worth listening to for sure. And then we've got Glitterbug. This is probably my least favorite of their albums. It's just a little bit forgettable for me, but the artwork is really cool. This was another gift from my in-laws, so thank you to them for that. And then the album that got me into this band at all, This Modern Glitch. This is like the 20th anniversary edition. 10th anniversary edition. Yeah, they're not that old. 20, what am I talking about? Anyway, this is like top 5 favorite album for me. Love this album. So good. And then for a while I couldn't get their debut album. They didn't press it. They didn't have it. So the best I could do was this little EP that they released like first. And it has some of the songs from the debut on it. So I just picked that up. But then they did re-release the debut album. So I got that one as well. So I completed the collection, have all of the Wombats. They're releasing a new album, I think probably next year. They put out one single for it. I don't like the single, so I'm very interested to see what this album's going to be. But yeah, that's all my records. I should have kept a count so I know how many I have. At one point, I started putting them all into Discogs, and then I got tired of that pretty quickly, and I realized I can't be bothered to do that, so I haven't done that, but maybe I should. Anyway, yeah, so thanks for the few of you who are hanging out, talking to me through this video. It's a fun time. I'd love to do more streams if I can figure out what to talk about. Just kind of talk to you guys more, hang out, answer some questions. If you're watching this as a recorded video, because it'll go up live on the channel once we're done, thank you for making it this far. That's kind of crazy. It's a long video, but yeah, leave any questions below that you have for me. I'd love to do like a little Q&A if you have any other questions. Maybe I'll do another live stream as a Q&A if I get enough questions. And yeah, I dropped an Adam and the Ants video this morning, so check that out if you haven't already. It was really interesting one to watch. Cro-Mags is hopefully coming next. I just got to get my head around all the research and actually write that video, but hopefully that'll be coming next and coming pretty soon. Hope everyone had a great Halloween. Hope everyone has a great day. Thank you so much for hanging out. I'll see you later.